Hello and welcome back to JLXP. It has been too long. Much has happened since the last episode. I would imagine that most people that saw the last episode also saw me doing Worlds, so I don't feel as bad about not having a podcast for 2 weeks, but I do apologize for being dark for so long. I was hoping that I was going to be able to do some podcasts on my off days in play-in, or maybe right when groups 1 ended, between the first stage of groups and the second stage of groups. But yeah, I was too gassed. Other things kind of got in the way, but I am here now to talk about Group A, because it is currently a few hours after Group A concluded, with T1 going 5-1, EDG going 4-2, Fnatic going 2-4, and C9 getting the first dub for North America, but ultimately falling to 1-5 to make NA's record overall at Worlds 1-11. And yeah, this episode, I do have some scattered thoughts that I was just wondering about while NA was going 0-9, and kind of thinking about how year over year, how I rationalize what's happening this year, and just kind of going through some stuff, not trying to make excuses, but just kind of giving data and giving my thoughts. And then also just talk about the games that were today and a little bit about what happened in this group, because I think with everything being settled, the group is pretty much at expectation. I think there would have been a decent amount of debate going in about whether T1 or EDG was going to be the top team. If you believe T1 was going to be the historical behemoth that they are at Worlds, always making it out first in their group. Faker has always made it out first in his group in every single one of his Worlds appearances. But they did stumble towards the end of the summer split, even though they did make finals before getting swept. But they were, they barely won 3-2 against Damwon in the semifinal. So there were reasons to kind of doubt how good they would be. And then EDG with just the overall strength of the LPL, but then also the inconsistency of the LPL on the world stage, but also knowing they are the defending world champions. It's really hard to, in good faith, say odds on one of those teams isn't going to make it just because you think Fnatic or C9 are going to YOLO their way out of this group. So no huge surprises, right? NA versus EU ended up going 1-1. The biggest surprise was the best of one that Fnatic took over T1 to actually prevent them from going 6-0 in the group. But let's break it down a little bit more granularly, and I'll start with the C9 versus Fnatic matchups, which is actually pretty interesting, because I feel like there was so much debate about Fudge's champion pool in the first week of groups when he was playing Fiora versus Aatrox, or if he was playing Jax, and just unable to get adequate advantages to be able to carry the game, but also really glossing over the fact that like Jensen was 0-4 very early on in their game against EDG because they were just chain ganking him because bot lane didn't have any pressure and the support could just kind of move up whenever they wanted, and they weren't communicating very well about the presence of where the support jungler could be. Like, the whole early game was just off. They were significantly getting outplayed in a lot of their other losses. But in the Fnatic loss in particular, which was the first game they played at Worlds, they just didn't have good scaling. Like, Fnatic, I think, in their early drafts to kind of pop out to a lead at the start of this groups was just, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but drafting more scaling, especially than C9. And then for Fnatic, when they were able to win the game against T1, their strength was actually in the Lucian Nami, and basically Upset got kind of solo kill on Gumayushi to put them ahead. And this is for groups 1, right? And then kind of flipping that over to today, where every team played 3 games. C9 took that lesson against Fnatic, and their first 3 picks were literally Ornn, Orianna, and Trundle. And then Jinx Lulu on 4-5. That's about as much scaling as you can pick in almost every position. And then they obviously did also play better. I'd say Razor didn't have good early game ganks. They gave over that kill in bot lane. At the Rift Herald fight, there was a really close smite sequence where Trundle barely stayed alive. Blabber's Trundle. Jensen got a kill. Rift Herald died, so Trundle got all this passive healing, and they ended up kind of using that to slingshot themselves to a 2,000 or 3,000 gold advantage. And then, based on the team comps, the game was pretty much over. So, it's weird, just because so much did happen in this group, but my takeaways are actually surprisingly muted. I'll talk a little bit more about Fnatic in the way I would react or judge kind of the Reddit threads or the social commentary that I saw. And everyone was like really hard flaming them for giving over Yuumi twice. The first time they played T1 and then their game against EDG today. Sorry, the first time they played EDG and then the next time they played EDG, because they actually beat T1 when T1 played Aphelios. I don't really care, because to me, and this is a larger theory discussion, when Fnatic plays C9, they can kind of just arms race scaling. Because I think the skill discrepancy in any of the 3 lanes isn't like large enough that if they pick too much scaling, they run a large risk of just getting run over. And there's still probably a lane that someone's going to be able to outplay so that they can have prio somewhere. So an example of this today that went wrong for Fnatic is when they picked Victor and Jensen matched with Orianna. But then even though Orianna's traditionally like at least kind of out of the meta, but considered a scaling pick in a lot of circumstances, Jensen still won lane fairly handily and was able to get pressure because Jensen just had that like slight skill advantage. But I feel like if Jensen played Orianna against Faker or Scout, he wouldn't win lane. So, and maybe that's incorrect, because Humanoid actually played like one of the best Worlds I think I've ever, first half of Worlds, one of the best mid laners I've seen actually perform in groups. So either way, that's just an example. But when Fnatic plays a T1 or an EDG, it actually worked for them the first time they played T1 by just picking a hard winning early game bot lane, so they actually have a way to play the game. So to me, when they give over Yuumi, even though it is a very powerful pick, their expectation and the pressure they're putting on themselves is that they need to be able to get early lane prio bottom so they have a way to play the game. So what winning looks like for them is we can bring jungler attention down, we can win lane handily, and when Lucian hits his first item power spike, we can actually kill these guys under their turret, like they did against T1 the first time. And yes, T1 didn't have Yuumi, but the strength of the lane in concept is the same. So that's why I think they were doing that. It didn't work, but also I'm so conflicted in situations like this where it really is like major underdogs losing to the favorites, and all the conversation ends up being about like, damn, why the hell is Fudge on Fiora? Damn, why are they giving Yuumi again? It's like, because they're just going to lose no matter what. Like, that's kind of the thing. There's always going to be something you can nitpick because you're always trying to make these trade-offs in draft. Like, I kind of think if C9 puts Fudge on Ornn against T1 or EDG, it probably doesn't go that much better than with him on Fiora. So it's just a hard conversation for me to have, because I understand why both Fnatic and C9 are doing these picks, and I know what a difficult situation they're in. So that's that was basically like a C9 Fnatic lump back and forth. Hopefully everyone was able to follow that. Kind of talk quickly on T1 and EDG. Both these teams look pretty solid. I would say the biggest standout from either of these teams for me was Zeus. He really, really styled on this group. Like 40 or 50 CS up, living under the enemy turret with the enemy there on multiple occasions, accruing massive gold leads, having the most pop-off GP game in the group win clinching game. And this guy's a problem. He played a little unhinged in a few situations. Like one moment in the Fnatic game today when he was on Yone, he just like autoed a turret with no minions around like 3 times, took 3 turret shots and had to alt flash away before an objective was spawning on Yone just to TP back, but then not have his ult or flash for like the inevitable Drake fight. But that's like one blemish on otherwise the person who looked like T1's best player. If I had to kind of think of best performing player for EDG, I would probably just say Viper still. Sivir Yumi game, super solid. Laning phase, super solid. You know he's going to arrive in team fights in a big way. I think for Fnatic, it's a bit of a tie between Upset and Humanoid. I think Humanoid had some ridiculously good laning games. He wasn't able to bring it home today when he had a large laning lead on Akali against Faker Silas, but overall, he actually had such a crack group stage that I don't think should be diminished just because they went 2-4 in what is a somewhat impossible group for them to advance from. And then Upset also was incredibly pivotal in their upset win against T1 and also their win against C9 earlier. So those would be the 2 top performing players there for me. And it's really tricky for me to find one for C9 because they literally only won 1 game. I'm partial to Jensen Oriana just because he's just, when he reaches for that pick, it's like almost always going to go well. Part of TL's 2020 comeback also included some Jensen Oriana shenanigans. So I'm just partial to like Jensen Oriana at Worlds coming out in a big way. Berserker had a decent Jinx game. I thought Sven did struggle as a lot of us expected when the Lulu Yumi meta changed. Weirdly enough, they literally get their only win when he's on Lulu. He performs well. What are you going to do? Like, he's been playing support for like 5 months. So I can't judge them that harshly for finishing 1-5, albeit it's very disappointing. Okay. That's generally how I expect the rest of these Worlds episodes to go. I am going to be recapping groups B, C, and D when they finish, going longer or shorter, picking on guests if they are available to come on. But there's one other thing that I do want to touch on, and it's just like a little bit of Worlds history and like context setting, because I'm also going to be releasing this at kind of a strange time because it's late at night and I'm going to have a lot of European fans. So fingers crossed this just doesn't get downvoted for like coping mechanisms or something, because I do think some of this stuff is important context. The dynamics of Worlds have actually changed and things have gotten a lot harder. So this is so far still an embarrassing group stage for NA. You do not want to go 0-9 in the first week, and you definitely don't want to go 1-11 in your first 12. Like 0-18 is dead, but 1-17 would still have a pretty big ring to it. I imagine people would still try and meme that for over a year. But I will also say, when you're playing single round robin best of ones, there is going to be natural variance from year to year. Some years you're going to overperform your baseline. Some years you're going to underperform your baseline. I would say in the 09, NA underperformed their baseline by like 1 or 2 games. I think baseline, like being completely real, would be like 1-8 or 2-9 based on the groups they were in and the opponents they were playing against. Because I went back and I'll go 2021, 2020, 2019. who were the teams that they were actually beating when they were getting these world's records? So, okay, really quickly. In 2021, out of 18 games, because 3 teams are in groups, NA went 8-10. In 2020, they went 6-12. And in 2019, they went 5-13. This year, I think it is fairly unlikely that they make it to 5. But as you'll see in this next point, the context of their groups is a lot different. So, this year, their only win is against Fnatic so far. In 2021, I would actually say, based on expectations, even though they went 8-10, because of the strength of their groups and their qualities of wins, this was one of NA's best years ever. They were a tiebreaker draw away from TL making it out as the second NA team from groups. So, C9 in 2021 got 1 win off Rogue, 1 win off of FPX, and a tiebreaker win against Rogue. So 2 EU wins and 1 win against the LPL. 100 Thieves got 2 of their wins. I accidentally wrote the wrong team down when I was doing this. They got 2 of their wins off of not the most powerful team. I'm getting there, guys. 2 of their wins off Detonation Focus Me, of their 3 wins. And then 1 of their wins against EDG. So that's 1 other LPL win, 2 EU wins. And then TL was the most impressive, I think, because they got 1 win off of LNG, 1 win off of MAD, 1 win off of Gen G, but then lost the tiebreaker to Gen G. So those are a lot of quality wins. Quality win versus LNG, MAD, Gen G, EDG, FPX, and 2 wins versus Rogue. Huge success, honestly. Let's go to 2020. All right. Best performing team, a little biased, was TL at 3-3 with a win against Suning, a win against G2, and then a win against Machi. LMS 1 seed is always arguable. Like, that's going to be the easiest win because there's also a loss to Machi, and that's ultimately why we didn't advance from the group. Because if we 2-0 Machi, then there's a 3-way tie at 4-2. And you can tiebreak that. TSM obviously goes 0-6. And FlyQuest, who's 3-3, 2 of those wins were against Unicorns of Love. So the quality win was against Top. But that was also once FlyQuest was already eliminated, so they were playing with less pressure. 2019 is another example where you can look at the overall win-loss, and it's 5-13. But C9 got 2 wins off of HKA, and TL got 2 wins off of AHQ. So the one quality win that NA had in that 5-13 Worlds was a Dom1 win by TL. Everything else against a European team, a Korean team, or an LPL team was a loss. And none of these results are good, but I'm just basically, if you followed that and just kind of heard me delivering the numbers, I would say in 2022, like, 100 Thieves had a relatively competitive game against RNG. EG had a relatively competitive game against JDG. There was a few of those games where you're thinking like, damn, that was their chance to pick up a win, and they missed it. So that's where the 0-9 is rather than the like 1-8 or the 2-7 baseline. But the overall strength of the groups has just increased. So those like easier wins just don't come through. And just for like a little bit of shock history, the last time NA hosted a world championship, 2016. Like, look at the groups we're getting now in 2022 and listen to this group from 2016 World Championship. EDG, H2K Gaming, AHQ Esports Club, the number 2 seed from the LMS, and INTZ Esports. So compare these groups now, where like the easiest team you might find in a group or like consider to be in a group, if we're taking out the like 4 major regions, and I know people are memeing on NA not being a major region, but they are based on their ability to consistently qualify for group stage from the play-in. AHQ Esports was the number 2 seed in the LMS, equivalent to the number 2 seed in the PCS. So that's this year's World's equivalent of Beyond Gaming, who didn't qualify for group stage. And then INTZ is the Loud of today, who also didn't qualify for group stage. Both of them were actually in the same group so you could get wins against them. Just the difference in strength is so beyond. And I know this is just kind of a lot of thoughts, but it's because I haven't had a podcast in 2 weeks. And this might not be the time for this, and maybe people meme this for me. But like, someone is always going to be at the bottom. And in the past, in 2018 or 2019, that was the LMS. The LMS got 3 teams into groups in both 2018 and 2019, and in back-to-back years, they went 3-15. And what ended up happening is, one, the LMS changed to the PCS, did become a weaker region, so their seeding was changed. But then instead of filling those seeds with more like of the best teams from the 5th or the 6th or the 7th best region, more teams were just added from China and Korea, which is such a big jump in skill level that now basically NA is the worst region in the group stage, whereas previously they were the second worst region in the group stage. And that actually makes a very big difference in your win-loss. So that's my very long-winded way of making this point. I think there's already been a lot of good content, and there's going to be a lot of natural discussion about why NA should do better or why it's the same every year, et cetera, et cetera. But actually last year was a very good year. This year is a very bad year. Maybe next year is average. Who knows? There's going to be, I'm sure, a ton of change once again in the LCS because of them not performing so far at the World Championship. Either way, they have 2 more chances to pick up some wins as the group stages continue. EG and 100 Thieves still have yet to have their groups play. And I will, fingers crossed, be there to react to those as well. So that's going to do it for this episode. If there are specific topics that you really want to hear me discuss, please put them in the comments. And if you have like-minded topics, just upvote those to the top of like the YouTube comments, and it'll give me time to think about it so I can deliver maybe a more structured podcast than this one. But anyways, happy to be back. Happy that NA did get their first win. 0-18 would be tragic. And overall, I do think this group went largely to expectations. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you next time.